Rain tapped softly against the cracked window of a small apartment as Emma pulled a faded blanket tighter around her daughter, Lily. At only 5 years old, Lily's tiny body shook with fever, her eyes glassy yet trusting as they followed her mother's every move. Emma's heart ached, not because of the illness alone, but because she had no choice left, no babysitter, no family nearby, and no money to miss another day of work. She whispered reassurances to Lily, though she barely believed them herself. The bills piled high on the counter, each one screaming louder than the last. Emma worked as a secretary at a large corporate office, a place where the CEO's presence was felt like a storm cloud no one dared approach. Rumors painted him as cold, detached, and obsessed with perfection. Yet that morning, Emma had to make a choice: risk losing her job by bringing Lily with her or risk losing everything else by staying home. With trembling hands, she dressed her daughter, tucked her favorite stuffed bunny under her arm, and whispered a silent prayer. As they stepped into the towering glass building, Emma's chest tightened. Her co-workers glanced at the coughing child with disapproval, their whispers sharp like knives. But Emma held Lily's hand tighter, repeating in her mind, "Just get through today." She had no idea that one innocent word from her daughter would shatter the icy walls of power, silence the office whispers, and change their lives forever. The office buzzed with its usual rhythm, phones ringing, keyboards clattering, heels clicking against polished floors, but all of it seemed louder to Emma that morning. She guided Lily to a quiet corner near her desk, laying a small blanket on the chair and whispering for her to rest. Lily's soft coughs echoed in the sterile air, drawing curious glances from co-workers who shook their heads. Emma's cheeks burned with embarrassment, but she kept typing, determined to finish her reports before anyone noticed too much. Yet fate is rarely so kind. A deep voice cut through the room like a sudden storm. "Why is there a child here?" The CEO himself, Alexander Stone, stood at the edge of her desk. Tall, commanding, and known for his unshakable discipline, he seemed even more intimidating up close. Emma's heart sank. This was it, the end of her job, her last lifeline. She rose quickly, stammering, "I'm so sorry, sir. My daughter is sick, and I had no one else." She braced herself for cold reprimand or, worse, immediate dismissal. But before Alexander could respond, Lily stirred, her eyes fluttering open. She studied him with innocent curiosity, then reached out a small hand and whispered one word that froze the entire room: "Daddy." Gasps rippled across the office as time seemed to stop. Alexander's usually unreadable face shifted, confusion, shock, and something deeper flickered in his eyes. He opened his mouth, but no words came. Emma's breath caught in her throat as silence hung heavy, every heartbeat echoing louder than the last. She had no idea why her daughter said it, but in that instant, the CEO who was feared by all stood utterly disarmed by a child's simple, heartfelt word. Emma's face flushed crimson as whispers swirled across the office. "Daddy?" She wanted to explain, to apologize, to disappear all at once. But before she could speak, Lily stretched her tiny arms toward Alexander, as if she somehow knew him. His stern expression faltered, the icy mask he carried into every meeting seemed to crack. He crouched down, almost instinctively, until his eyes met Lily's. Why would you call me that?" he asked softly, his voice stripped of its usual authority. Lily simply shrugged, her small hand brushing his sleeve. "Because you look like him," she murmured, her voice weak from fever. Emma froze. She had never spoken about Lily's father to anyone at work, never mentioned the man who vanished before their daughter was born. Her heart twisted, part fear, part longing, as Alexander's eyes flickered with something unspoken. For a long moment, the CEO who was known for ruthless decisions simply knelt there, studying the fragile child who had mistaken him for someone else. Then, without warning, he removed his jacket and wrapped it gently around Lily, shielding her from the office chill. The staff watched, stunned. This was a man who never paused for anyone, never broke protocol. Emma's lips trembled as she whispered, "I'll take her home, sir. Please, just don't fire me." Alexander turned his gaze toward her, his expression unreadable, but his voice carried something entirely unexpected. "You're not fired," he said firmly. "But she doesn't belong here sick. Come with me." And before Emma could protest, the CEO of the entire company reached down, lifting Lily into his arms with a tenderness that silenced every doubt in the room. The elevator ride felt surreal. Emma stood frozen, clutching her purse, as Alexander carried Lily effortlessly against his chest. For the first time, she noticed how different he seemed when stripped of his boardroom armor. Gone was the impenetrable CEO, replaced by a man whose steady hands and softened eyes radiated unexpected warmth. Lily snuggled closer to him, her fevered cheeks pressing against his shirt, and he adjusted his hold with practiced care that made Emma's heart ache with questions she dared not ask. "There's a clinic on the lower floor," Alexander explained quietly. "My company doctor will see her immediately." Emma blinked, astonished. She had expected reprimands, maybe even security escorting her out, not compassion. "Sir, you don't have to," she began, but he cut her off gently. "I do." The doors slid open, revealing a private wing Emma never knew existed, its walls lined with serene art and its staff greeting Alexander with a nod of respect. Within minutes, a physician examined Lily, confirming what Emma had feared: severe flu, worsened by lack of proper rest and medication. Emma's throat tightened as guilt washed over her. She had been trying so hard, juggling bills, late nights, and endless worry, that she had missed how badly her daughter needed more. Sitting beside her, Alexander studied her with unusual intensity. "Why didn't you ask for help?" he asked. The question, simple yet piercing, made Emma's eyes sting with tears. No one had ever asked her that before. "Because I didn't think anyone would care," she admitted softly. And for the first time, Alexander Stone, the man feared by an entire corporation, felt something stir in his chest that business could never teach: empathy. For hours, Emma sat quietly by Lily's bedside in the clinic, watching as color slowly returned to her daughter's cheeks. Alexander remained nearby, pacing at first, then eventually pulling up a chair. The silence between them wasn't awkward, it was heavy, filled with unspoken thoughts. At last, he broke it. "When she called me Daddy, it caught me off guard," he admitted, his voice softer than Emma had ever heard. She lowered her eyes, ashamed. "I'm so sorry. She never knew her father. I guess, she just wants someone to be that for her." Her words trembled in the air, fragile but honest. Alexander leaned back, exhaling deeply. "Funny thing," he said quietly, "I've spent years building this empire, making decisions that affect thousands of people. Yet somehow, I've never stopped to consider what it means to actually belong to someone." Emma's gaze lifted, and for the first time, she saw not the CEO, but a man carrying invisible scars. She wondered what loneliness looked like for someone at the top. Lily stirred again, her small hand reaching instinctively toward Alexander. He didn't hesitate, he clasped her fingers gently, his eyes betraying a tenderness few had ever witnessed. "Children don't lie about what they feel," he murmured, more to himself than to Emma. A lump formed in her throat as she realized this wasn't just kindness, it was a moment of truth unraveling before her. The man the world saw as unshakable was being undone by the innocent trust of a child. And in that fragile instant, Emma understood something profound. Sometimes life doesn't give us the family we expect, but it gives us the people we need. Days later, Lily was back on her feet, her laughter once again filling the tiny apartment that had known too many heavy silences. But something had shifted. Emma noticed it the moment Alexander began checking in, not as a CEO concerned about an employee, but as a man who couldn't quite stay away. He brought groceries one evening, insisting it was just practical. Another day, he showed up with children's books, claiming he had picked them up on the way. Each gesture, though disguised in formality, revealed a growing bond he no longer bothered to hide. For Emma, it was bewildering. For Lily, it was simple. To her, Alexander wasn't a corporate titan or a feared boss, he was the man who had carried her when she was sick, the man who stayed. One night, as they shared takeout at Emma's small kitchen table, Lily climbed into Alexander's lap and whispered the word again, this time without hesitation, "Daddy." Silence followed, but instead of confusion, Alexander smiled, a rare, genuine smile that softened every edge of his being. His hand rested protectively on Lily's back as he looked at Emma. "If you'll let me," he said, his voice steady, "I'd like to be more than just your boss. For both of you." Tears welled in Emma's eyes, not from fear this time, but from the overwhelming realization that kindness had rewritten her story. The powerful man who once lived behind walls of steel had been transformed by the trust of a child and the resilience of a mother. And in that moment, their lives intertwined, not through wealth or power, but through the simple, unshakable truth that love, in its purest form, changes everything.